Have you ever tried to get a friend into Magic? And maybe you bought them a Precon deck, showed them the rules in a quick 1v1, and then you brought them to your local game store, sit down with some randos, and play a game of Commander. But then, the spells start flying. So many triggers and abilities and mechanics, each turn more confusing than the last. By the time your new friend finishes reading one set of cards, the next few spells have already been cast. Their deck doesn't really seem to do much. They cast their commander a few times and then it gets swept up in board wipes or blocks unfavorably and it's gone. Then after the game, you ask your friend, how was it? And they say, fine. Next week, let's play Mysterium instead. And you're hyped because Mysterium is a lot of fun. But you're also sad because your friend didn't seem to have a great time and it feels like they won't be playing much Commander in the future. This is because Precon decks are traps for new players. And there are two big reasons for this. But first, if you like videos like this, consider subscribing. Thanks. Alright, the first reason that Precons are not great for beginners is that Commander as a whole is not good for beginners. Look, I love Commander. Ever since Tweedledee and Tweedledum ruined Modern, I've been mostly playing EDH. It's a ton of fun, a true brewer's paradise. Casual Commander is really where you can take most of your jank themes and cards and make them work. But the problem is, the card pool is massive, and there are 3 times as many opponents as there are normally, so you need to keep track of a lot. And for a new player, I can understand how it can be very confusing. There's also things that you don't really learn in casual Commander. When you play a 60 card format, you need to be a lot more aware of open mana, priority, baiting your opponent, understanding matchups, learning how card advantage works, especially in something like Limited. Many people who jump into casual Commander and stay there never learn tight play. And you don't need to be playing at a Pro Tour level to enjoy casual Commander. But I do think you need to learn the basics of priority and card advantage, otherwise you're going to be stuck wondering why you lost after emptying your hand and losing everything to one board wipe. The principles of the game are harder to grasp when everyone is doing their own thing willy-nilly. So if you shouldn't start with Commander, then where should you start? Sadly, these days, there is not really a cheap format to jump into. That is a whole separate issue that I will talk more about in an upcoming video. But basically, look at the prices of decks in almost any format. It's very difficult to convince your friend to shell out hundreds of dollars to just try Magic, outside of Pauper, which is actually a decent place to start. If you have a store that does Pauper events, it's pretty great. I would highly recommend it. But otherwise, oftentimes I'll start players by saying, hey, download Magic Arena, do their tutorial, and play a bit of Standard. This way, they can see how triggers work and priority and learn the basics in a controlled environment. If you're also a new player looking to get into the game watching this video, I would recommend getting Magic Arena and playing the tutorial. It's a great way to learn. I would not recommend wasting money on Arena. Decks are generally still pretty expensive, and you can't sell cards to get your money back, ever. Also, I dislike rotating formats like Standard overall. I enjoy keeping my decks around for a long time, and not having to throw them away when rotation happens. Another thing you can do if you're trying to get your friend into the game is by throwing together 40 card intro decks. Something like a bunch of green creatures and ramp, and then another deck with islands and counterspells and some card draw. Just be sure to include cards of different types so that they can see how the different types work. These don't need to be expensive. It can be random draft chaff lying around. Just simple stuff so people can get the basics. Also, if you play Dan, which probably nobody out there plays, it's a good simple way to get into the game as well. And since 2 players share one Dan deck, if you already have one built, you're ready. Maybe I'll do a video on Dan as well. Alright, on to the second problem I have with Precons. So you're a new player or you're someone getting a friend into the game. They've played Arena or intro decks that you built, and they've learned the basics. Maybe played a few Standard games online. Time to buy a Precon, right? I don't think so. Precons are pretty bad decks. Now this can change from Precon to Precon, like the Esper Knights one is pretty good out of the box, although a lot of that is attributed to how powerful the commander is. I know you don't need to play the most powerful deck to have a good time playing casual Commander, but every single time I see someone at my shop say, this is a Precon or upgraded Precon, they literally do nothing all game, and they have a terrible time. Recently, I recall someone using the new Ixalan Vampire Precon that they made a few small upgrades to, and the deck did not function at all. But I mean, look at this deck, of course it doesn't. The mana base is full of tap lands. Although I like Bajuka Bog, some of these other ones are pretty meh. Myriad Landscape is not amazing, and I'm not a huge fan of the Basilica either. These cause you to lose so much tempo because you skip a turn. And cards like Temple of the False God are also bait cards. I think non-green decks that don't have a way to ramp additional lands into play are not great homes for Temple of the False God. If it's in your opening hand, it's basically not a land. Honestly, if you're only in 2 colors, just play basics. You don't really need any dual lands at all. And basics are so good just because they enter untapped. Another issue with precons, and this is a huge one, is that they don't really have enough card draw. This deck, for example, does have Twilight Prophet and Welcoming Vampire, which are good, great ways to draw cards, but the other card draw is very win more. By win more, I mean a big splashy card that doesn't do anything if you're behind. Cards like Champion of the Dusk and Pact of the Serpent seem good if you're already winning and have like 5-6 vampires in play. They don't do anything after a board wipe, or even if you just have 2 vampires in play, they're pretty mid. And the deck doesn't have many ways to protect its board at all. With only 4-ish draw spells, you're gonna get outvalued by most other decks. I love big splashy win more cards in my casual commander decks. I play them all the time. That being said, your deck can't be all win more cards, and your card draw and removal shouldn't be win more cards as well. Those should just work on their own, otherwise your deck will have no consistency. And without consistency, your deck is going to feel like either you run people over, which probably won't happen with a precon, or you do nothing. And those games are turnoffs to new players. When you sit down at the table, you cast your commander, a couple of random things, and then all your stuff gets destroyed, but everybody else drew more cards than you, so they're going to continue to play cards, and you're just not going to do anything. Being stuck in top deck mode and going, well, here's my land for turn, use one random creature that doesn't do anything on its own, just feels bad. Those are the games that cause people to stop playing. And I understand the frustration if you're new to the game and you haven't learned about sandbagging or card advantage and all these other things that you don't really learn from just the arena tutorial. So if you or a loved one
was diagnosed with mesothelioma
or are trying to get into Magic, don't buy precon decks. See if your friend will help you build a deck or go online and find some budget decks. I have some deck building guides on this channel that can help you start out, and I think my budget Kosei deck is pretty darn good. I haven't made that many budget deck builds yet, although I'll make more, so subscribe, stay tuned. But there are tons of other creators online that have made intro commander decks to play, and oftentimes they're better than the precons. Also, the subreddit r/Budget Brews is a good place to find some fun budget decks to start with. If you bought a precon and you are loving commander, that is totally fine. There is nothing wrong with that. I just think that learning EDH as a starting point isn't the best experience for most players. But everyone is different, so take this opinion with a grain of salt. Also, I wholeheartedly think that you can get a better deck than one of those precons for the same price or less, and you will have more fun games that way. Plus, building your own deck and really making it yours is what Commander is all about. The decks that I've built, fallen in love with, and been tinkering with for years are the decks that I enjoy playing the most, because they're really mine. Let me know your experiences with precon decks in the comments below, and if you think I'm wrong, let me know as well. I'd love to hear it. Thanks for watching, subscribe for more.